Please tell me now. Is there something I should know? So, this is probably going to be a little bit longer than these videos usually are, but I'm tackling what is probably the most nerve-wracking element of public speaking, so I hope it's justified. That is dealing with questions from your audience. Now, today I'm not going to be talking about the content of your answers, but it's nevertheless always worth stressing that you don't have to be the expert with all the answers. Okay, that way madness lies. Instead, regard the Q&A as an opportunity for some open discussion with your subject, and just remember that if your audience have got questions, that's because they're interested and engaged in what you've been talking about. So, some thoughts about managing the Q&A session that typically ends a presentation, and I've broken this down into 3 stages. The first one, now, the only thing that's really worse than getting questions is not getting questions. So it's crucial that you frame your request for questions in the right way. At the start of your presentation, warn your audience that you'll be taking questions at the end just to get them into the right mindset. Now, when you get to the end of your presentation, what do you say? Well, I don't know about you, but there have been a few times where I've experienced the situation where a speaker has said, "Who's got questions?" And they're met with the silence of the grave. So it's much more effective to say something like, "What questions do you have for me?" Or even better, "Who wants to kick off our discussion today?" It's just a lot more collaborative, collegiate. If people are still reluctant, what do you do? Well, one thing you can do is you can pose the first question yourself and answer it. Now, if you feel that's a little bit awkward, you can couch it in something like, "I heard the other day such and such, and it made me think about this element," and you can sort of ease your audience that way into the interactive part of your presentation. It also sets a very informal tone, so people might be more willing then to ask a question once you've finished. Also, if you do that, it also gives you the opportunity to maybe focus your audience's attention on a particular element of your presentation that you've just given, if you particularly want to sort of engage a bit more about that. Something else you can do is perfectly acceptable is to plant your first question, get a friend in the audience to just get the ball rolling. Absolutely fine. Once the first question's been asked, people are much more likely to engage. The other good thing about that is you'll probably find that the first question sets the tone for all the questions that follow. So if you get a friend asking the first question, you're going to be golden. Second stage is receive and repeat. So when somebody's asking you a question in the audience, once they finish speaking, just pause for a second just to make sure they have absolutely finished speaking. Otherwise, it's going to get all awkward with people talking over one another. It also gives you that little bit of extra time just to think about what your answer is going to be and how you're going to structure it. By all means, if you want, when someone's asked a question, show them that you value that question, but do not do that by saying, "That's a good question," because if you say, "That's a good question," then you're going to have to be saying that after every question that follows, and it doesn't look very authentic. So if you do want to value the question that's been asked to you, what you could say is something like, "That's a question I've asked myself," or "A colleague and I were talking about just that area just this morning," so something like that. Now, this stage is called receive and repeat. So the repeat is when you've been asked a question, you repeat it to the audience as a whole, but you paraphrase. And this serves 2 purposes. Firstly, you're checking with the questioner that you understand what they're asking of you. And secondly, you're keeping the rest of the audience engaged. You don't want them to drift off, to switch off. Third and final stage is answering the question. Now, as I just said, it's crucial you keep the rest of the audience engaged. So while you're answering a question, you will be making eye contact, I hope, most of the time with your questioner, but make sure you're also flicking your gaze around the rest of the audience. just to make sure that they feel part of the discussion. When you've answered the question, confirm with the questioner that they're satisfied with your answer. And then, when you ask for the next question, make sure you look elsewhere in your audience, or otherwise you might find you're getting drawn into a one-on-one conversation with the questioner and everyone else begins to drift off. So, those are the 3 stages. I've mentioned tone before, so throughout these 3 stages, make sure you're keeping the tone right as well. Make sure you're keeping everyone relaxed and happy. Very simple to do this. Step forward, shows you're accessible. Step into the audience's space, engaging with them. Smile, obviously. Raise your eyebrows, it opens your face, it shows that you're approachable. And lastly, when listening to somebody in the audience ask you a question, just tilt your head a little bit. It shows you're warm, engaged, and focused on what they're saying. So, at the end of those 3 stages, what do you do? Now, this is really important. Once the Q&A session is finished, end with a final recap of the main points of your presentation. A lot of people don't do this. This is really crucial. If you don't do this, it all starts to peter out. People are gathering their stuff. Some people are waiting. Some people are leaving. So if you end with a final recap, you're ending on your own terms, a really strong final word, and it gives the audience a really strong impression of you. So that's it for today. I will be putting up some other videos dealing with other aspects of questions from the audience, so do keep an eye out for them.